Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Good morning. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Come on in. I want to welcome you to Monday Morning Jumpstart. How you doing this morning? I know there's a lot going on in the world, but I want to welcome you into this space. My name is Karen Hilton, and I have the great joy of supporting this beautiful place we call the Rock Your Vision Masterclass community. I'm founder of this community and also founder of TAP Executive Coaching. We've created this space just for you because if you are someone that's interested in doing life on your own terms, this is the space for you. We are an incredibly diverse community where we're focused on creating productive, positive, and healthy strategies to do life on our own terms. I don't know what you're facing or what you're dealing with right now, but you know what? We're all going through it right now. And you know what? We're going to do it together in a positive way. Today is a really special day. I have with me some of the most incredible, powerful, and inspirational leaders right here in this space. I have the great fortune of calling them friends and colleagues, teachers, and leaders. And I wanted to bring to you this conversation that we're having today called The Mind Matters: Coping, Caring, and the Way Forward. If that's something that's of interest to you, then I want to invite you to come on in, grab your coffee, grab your tea, whatever that is, and do me a favor, invite a friend. We're about to go in. You know what? We're not going to let darkness win in this season. We're going to tackle it head on, and I'm delighted to bring these amazing leaders to you. Good morning, everybody. I'm going to take a minute and just welcome you in. Good morning, Melissa Meeks. Good morning. So good to have you. Christy Kent from Influencers Kennesaw. Come on. We got influencers in the house. Good morning, beautiful. Coach Dudash, my bestie, my love in Tennessee. I love you, girl. Welcome on in. Vanessa, good morning. We're going to get to you in just a minute. I am so happy to have all of you in here. Well, I'm going to go ahead and get started. I want to introduce to you these amazing leaders, and we're going to just get right into it, if that's okay. We have with us this morning none other than Aronde Creighton. Good morning, Aronde.
Good morning, Karen. Good to be with you.
Good to be with you. Aronde is a community leader, an expert in his own space, and he is really leading the charge in some of the areas that go most untouched. And I'm going to have him introduce himself in just a moment. But I just wanted to say good morning, Aronde. We are delighted and honored that you would join us in this space.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me. And I'm so excited to be here with you and be here with the Rock Your Vision Masterclass.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And then we have none other than Dr. Denise Colson, one of my heroes. She is a legend in the space of trauma counseling. I'm honored to sit at her feet as one of her students, but also really excited to have her join this community. Good morning, Dr. Colson.
Good morning, Karen. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for inviting me. I appreciate it. And it's very early, so my voice is a man voice this morning, but I am truly delighted to be here with you. And I hope that I can bring some encouragement today.
Yes, I am so excited to have you join us. And then we have Vanessa Aliaga, who is our operations manager. She's a part of this community, and I'm honored to have her here. She is part of the magic that happens behind the scenes. She's joining us from New Jersey. Hi, Vanessa.
Good morning. Good morning, Karen. Thank you for the introduction, and good morning to all. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you for joining us. And then we have my roadie, Miss Alicia Newton. How you doing, boo?
I'm doing awesome this morning, Karen. Thank you. Thank you for having me. It is just an honor and a privilege to be here in the space. Thank you for continuing to pour out love and the positive energy that the world is just in such need of. I'm honored to be here with you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Coach Alicia is one of our coaches in the Rock Your Vision community, but she also has some amazing things going on in her life. I'm not going to steal her thunder, but she has a class coming up that y'all need to be a part of, and I'm going to have her talk about that in just a moment. She's doing some powerful work in the corporate space and really teaching leaders how to go in and how to draw from their inner source of leadership. I'm not going to steal your thunder. We'll get to that in a minute. And then we have none other than Pastor Andy Smith. Come on, everybody. Come on, Pastor Andy Smith. He's my pastor, y'all. Y'all can't have him. He's my pastor. And he is pastor of Influencers Church, Kennesaw campus. And he is a biblical scholar. I'm going to say it again. He is a professor. He is a ministry and community leader. The man can preach the paint off the walls, but he's walking the walk. He has an incredibly diverse community, one of the fastest growing campuses in the country. And he has some interesting perspective, some powerful perspective that I'm excited for you to hear. So we're just going to go right into it, if that's okay. Good morning, Pastor Andy. Welcome, welcome.
Good morning, everybody. What an honor, Karen, to be here. You guys are so already have become family. Just listening and talking to you guys. Thank you for letting me be a part of this. Love you all.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's our pleasure to have this esteemed panel. And today, what I'm going to ask everybody to do in the live feed, I would like for you to engage. This is not a kind of lecture environment. Honestly, there's no script. We want to have a dialogue. And I'm going to tell you why, but here's what I'd like for you to do. Today, we're really focusing on mental health. The things that have been happening to all of us, Black, white, male, female, gay, straight, Republican, Democrat. We want to have a conversation about the things that have been happening to us. And I think part of what we're going to discover is that we have a lot in common. You know, darkness has a way of shrouding the truth. Come on. Darkness has a way of shrouding the truth. It will cause you to look at things from a very narrow lens. But if you open up that lens a little bit and you begin to see what's happening, not only in our community, but in our private spaces, we can talk about some of the things that are happening to us on a regular basis. And so, community, what I want you to do is to engage. If you're watching this, make sure you click on the video so that we can know that you're here. We want you to comment, put your comments in the comment feature, ask questions, engage, give us a thumbs up, a fire emoji, a hands up, or whatever it is, to let us know when you hear something that resonates with you. We want you to talk back to us. Listen, we have this crowd here, this panel here, and their time is precious. We want to make it worth their while. So ask questions, share your comments. This is a place we're going to do it. And just so I say it, and make sure that I do say it, this is a positive, healthy, loving community. We want to keep the vibe and the commentary in that. So if that's you, then we want to welcome you in and invite you to engage. So let's go ahead and get started. And I'm going to just share with you a little bit of my journey and how we came to this topic. So most of you know, I'm an executive coach. I work in some of the most incredible companies in the world. I have traveled the country in my time, supporting organizations and leaders, helping them to figure out how to get focused, connect to their purpose, and develop the perspective that they're going to need in high stakes environments. So whether I'm dealing with a president of a company or the director of a board, or I'm working with entrepreneurs and women and men who are CEOs and COOs of their own homes, we're really doing the work to discover what it means to lead from the inside. And so, you know, I'm paid to keep it together. But what I was experiencing in this time in quarantine, and then all the things that are happening since the protests have begun, and some of the hard things that we're seeing in the news coming out of the murder of George Floyd, I have experienced an overwhelming sense of emotion, fear, worry, things that are not really in my, in my toolkit. Images and feelings from the past have come flooding forward. I wake up with tears rolling down my face. If that sounds familiar to you, or if you've been experiencing something during this time, would you just share, if you feel comfortable, share in the comments. Of course, don't share anything that is private or confidential, but we'd like to really kind of connect as a community. We want to talk about what's happening to us. And so these kinds of things have been happening to me. And for the first 3 weeks of quarantine, I was completely overwhelmed. I was shell-shocked as I watched my colleagues, my clients, having to shutter their doors, having to furlough people. It was breaking my heart because I'm very, very connected and embedded in my community. And so I just honestly became overwhelmed. If that's you, let me know in the comments. Dr. Colson, I want to just throw this out to you. First of all, what I'd love for you to do is just to tell us a little bit about your practice. What are your passion areas right now? And maybe you could speak to this thing that we're all facing with mental health. Could you share a little bit? And again, welcome to this community.
Thank you. It's great to be here. I manage a practice in McDonough, Georgia and Covington, Georgia, Eagles Landing Christian Counseling Center. We have 20 providers, and we've been around for 15 years. I've been actually in the field of counseling now for 36 years. I know I look so young, don't I? But yeah, the 36 years I've been doing this, and I love it. I love working with people. I love people. I've lived all over the United States. I grew up in California, lived in Kansas, came to Georgia where I finished high school, have been here, lived in Texas, moved to Texas, went to Illinois for college. So I've lived in a lot of different places. I love where I live. I love my community. I love the counselors that I lead. And it's been tough. It's been one of the toughest times, I think, in the mental health field, probably since the beginning of my career. I'm going to tear up. Sorry.
It's okay.
It's been, I manage this practice. I drew God drew these people really to me to lead. And we focus on trauma. Trauma in 1992, I began to really specialize in trauma back before it was trendy. Back before people were talking about it, back when I would discuss it or bring it forward, people would roll their eyes at me. But, we have worked hard. We've done a lot of research. We've moved forward and people are beginning to talk about it. The discussion is out there. So now we have this massive trauma that we all are experiencing together. I know there's this saying out there, together but separate. Well, we're separate. We're all experiencing it from our own perspective, but there are some things that we all have in common. And that is that what you're saying, overwhelming emotion and shock. Shock is the first thing we all experience when we have trauma. And so I think we've all been in shock, and then shock moves toward denial moves to anger. So, and then we have these other traumas, the murders that have taken place very publicly.
Yes.
And we are all seeing that. And so now we're dealing with trauma upon trauma. So if you have past trauma, childhood trauma, that, trauma is cumulative. It's not isolated.
Right.
In your brain, it is cumulative. So we're seeing, I think that anxiety was at about 18%, but I think that has gone up to almost 40 to 50% is the most recent statistics I saw. Anxiety leads to depression. So we'll be seeing a lot of depression following. We've already seen some suicides, of course. And that's tragic. But I think that, Karen, this program that you're doing is so important because people have to talk about what's going on with them, so that we can feel less isolated, so we can see that this too will pass. It will pass, and things can get better. But because if we don't do something, that, if this doesn't lead us, the tragedies that we're seeing don't lead us to some change, we'll go right back to the way things were.
Right.
But if we can harness the energy and the opportunity. God doesn't waste anything. God doesn't waste anything, and we can really move forward, and it can allow us to deal with not only the current issues, but encourage people to deal with past issues that haven't been dealt with historical trauma.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that. So you said a couple of things, and again, I want to invite this expert panel to engage whenever it strikes you. But one of the things that you said that I think is so powerful is the effect of what I call compound injury. As I began to look at my own experience, I'm like, why am I so overwhelmed? And again, leaders are often people who can take a lot, right? But it's the compound effect of what has happened. The pandemic was overwhelming. It overwhelmed the senses. Every one of our normal support networks were shut down, right? Normally, if you lose a job, what do? You go to Starbucks, right, and work, or you go to the library, or whatever, or maybe you go see your friend or your mom, or you call you go see your bestie. But all of those support networks, all of our community infrastructures were shut down. So it's normal that people were in shock. I just want to put it out there that if you've been trying to hold it all together, I hope that what Dr. Colson just said freed you, that what you are experiencing is shock. And I love the fact, Dr. Colson, that you have normalized that. It is reasonable that you would feel shock. That is so powerful. So the compound effect of what we're experiencing. So the pandemic was one thing, but then you had this thing that could not be unseen by everyone. And you also said something that I want to really draw to as a source of hope. This is not the first time that this country has seen civil unrest. No. And we have, we see it in the history books, depending on which history book you look at. Maybe it's some version of the truth, but all of us at least have some basic knowledge of the civil rights movement. And even back then, 60 some odd years ago, there were predominantly Black folks going to protest, and Dr. King became, our legend of the time, and people like him. My father was also one of those, and many of you have relatives who participated in those movements. But by and large, it was predominantly the African American community. I have really good news for you. Look around right now, because people have taken to the streets to protest. White, Black, Asian, Hispanic, Indian, mamas, daddies, brothers, sisters. Everybody has come out to decry the murder of George Floyd. And he represents, unfortunately, he has represented, because it was captured in video and all of us experienced the horror and trauma of what happened, we have said no more, no more. And I love the diverse outcry. And I want to talk about that for a moment. The fact that is, while tragic that we even have to go there, I want to talk about the power of it. But I also want to highlight the uniqueness of the Black experience in terms of what we can learn from it. It is us today. It is the Black community in the United States of America today. But lest we miss the lesson, it could be another group tomorrow. And so, Aronde, I want to take for just a moment, I really want to highlight some of the work that you're doing, because I do think that you have a very specific focus in the Black community in particular. But I'd love for you to just kind of talk about what the experience is when we talk about mental health, particularly in the Black community. But I also want to highlight the uniqueness of what's happening for the African American man? And then I'd like for you to comment about what it feels like to see a diverse representation of protest in our communities. Can you talk about that for just a moment?
Yeah, absolutely, Karen. You know, it is a very interesting time to be in, and we all deal with the different emotions. I love how you and Dr. Colson started that off with the emotions that come up. And you know, in my capacity, I serve as an executive coach, a consultant in the space of leadership and organization development. And what was interesting was that week of Memorial Day, after seeing the video of George Floyd, and then being here during the week as protests were happening in Atlanta, you know, it was interesting to see all of that and to see people really rallying, not just in Minneapolis, but here in our city of Atlanta and around the country. And then Monday morning hit. And Monday morning was interesting because as I'm getting ready for calls and getting ready for interactions with people, I'm getting text messages, I'm getting emails, I'm getting phone calls in between and while I'm on calls. You know, well, how are you doing? Or, you know, can we talk? And it got to a point by about 10 o'clock, I was already overwhelmed.
Yeah.
And then what began to happen was I'm getting text messages from my clients, number of African-American clients saying, oh my gosh, if I get one more call, one more text, one more email.
Wow.
And just the overwhelming nature of the outreach, and many times the outreach being very genuine.
Yeah.
Okay. But also there were some outreach opportunities that were, if we're honest, more about checking a box. And, you know, I checked in on this African-American colleague. I've checked that box. And it became, by the end of the week, the word that I consistently kept hearing was sheer exhaustion.
Right.
I'm just exhausted. My day has not ended. My day has begun. It continues to spin. And I think that what becomes really important to recognize with that, especially as we've talked specifically about those in the Black community, part of the unfortunate institution of racism is not having the power to control your own voice. Whether that is suppressing your voice because you can't speak up and speak out for fear of repercussions, or, as has happened to many colleagues this week, having to be forced to speak up even when you don't want to. And so there's an old poem by Kate Rushin called The Bridge. And there's a line in there where she says, I don't want to be your one Black friend amongst 34 white people. And there's something about that we have to understand, that it's overwhelming, you know, and as you've already indicated and acknowledged, this is nothing new for us in this community. You know, I mean, we had 3 murders alone this year that we're aware of. Right. And there are countless others that are being surfaced. Right. So how do we balance this? How do we show up authentically as ourselves, be engaged in a way that we hopefully can change the narrative, but also be able to care for ourselves? And where that started for me was I had the fortune of being in there's an organization out of Brooklyn called the Heal House, which focuses on wellness. And they launched last Monday a Black men's health opportunity. And there were about 150 of us on this call. And if you wanted to share, you shared. And if you wanted to just sit there and witness, then you sat there and witness. And it was a beautiful thing because people were able to be free to be themselves. Yeah. And out of that, you know, one morning, as you've already kind of indicated in terms of your perspective and faith, I was in prayer, and I was just really contemplating what now, what's needed, what's necessary. And I just very quietly heard respite. And I'm like, what is that? I'm a smart guy, but, you know, I mean, I'd looked up the word, and it really focuses on a timeout and a break and a pulling away from.
Come on.
And so with that, part of what I'm in the process of launching is the respite, which is simply an opportunity for those in the Black workplace and Black students to have a place that they can show up and just breathe. You know, as Dr. Colson knows, many times when we get stressed, we stop breathing. Yes, come on. And people don't always recognize that. So creating the opportunity to bring people into a place where we can teach them some techniques where they can breathe, but also to be there to witness and to just be in a space to hold space for other people, for them to be able to let out what needs to be let out. And if it's nothing I need to let out, how can I just hold the space for you for a period of time? And so we're in the process of working with a number of coaches and counselors to just offer that up as just a free offering to people all over the world, because this isn't just something that's impacting us here in the United States, but I'm working with clients in London and in India who are being impacted by this. And we've seen the protests that are happening in those areas around this same issue of racism.
Yeah, so powerful. Remind me if I forget, because y'all know I get all wrapped up in it. Aronde, we need to know where people can get a hold of you for a couple of reasons. Number one, to learn more about the respite. And so that's an offering that is specific to African Americans in the workplace and in other environments. But number two, if you are a coach or a healer, meaning a licensed, certified professional healer, we want to make sure that people know how to get in touch with you.
Absolutely.
This is incredibly important work, and thank you for your willingness to be vulnerable, to lead from the front during a time when you yourself are impacted. This is world-changing kind of work. So thank you for that. And let me just say publicly, as a man of color, I see you and I love you and I am for you. And so during this time when we need each other, I just want to reinforce that I'm here for you. And so let me just take a pause for just a moment and say two things. Number one, I want to thank all of you who are in this community right now, who are allies to the African American community. We love you. We appreciate you. We see you. And Pastor Andy gave a beautiful example about the fact that, you know, if one person in the family has a need, it does not minimize the needs of other people in the family. It just means that at that particular moment, someone in the family needs care. So we welcome you into this conversation. Y'all, this is family business, right? This is family business. And now it's public. So you know how it is. Mama used to say, keep your business in the house. Well, it's no longer in the house. It's on the street. And so we have to talk about it. And we want to do that in a productive way. But I just wanted to pause and welcome you. The second thing I want to do is I want to pop back into the comments and just thank everybody for joining us. Michelle Elise, hey boo, how you doing? Another influencer in the house. She says, thank you, Dr. Colson. In my culture, anxiety and depression are looked down upon as we are considered weak when expressing that one is affected. I've often had to navigate them in silence. Come on. And I'm so grateful for a greater understanding that it's okay to say you're not okay, so that I can communicate that effectively with my daughter. And she has an adult daughter. Listen to me. I talked to my cousin the other day, and she has an adult daughter, and her adult daughter collapsed in her house in tears, overwhelmed. And so now we're finding that our seasoned saints, the generation of our seasoned saints, are now having to come alongside and lift us up to remind us and encourage us. We've been here before and we will get through this. But I just think that's so powerful. So Michelle, thank you for that vulnerability and sharing that. In many communities, not just the African American community, it is taboo to talk about things like stress and overwhelm and anxiety and depression. Well, this morning, we're going to rip the lid off that thing. And I just want to free you to say that it is okay. Let me say something else. And y'all have heard me say this before. It is okay to not want to be the hero. Woo! I just set myself free. It's okay to not want to be the hero. Just don't be the victim. Because victims need to hide. There's a difference between self-care and victimization, right? There's a difference between self-care and victimization. With that, I'm going to bring Coach Alicia into the conversation. Right before I do that, I want to just highlight Coach Kyla Charlemagne is in the house. Good morning, Coach Alicia. Kyla, sorry, we got all these A's. Coach Kyla says, Aronde, it's so important to be able to talk candidly with others like you. I attended a Black Women in HR session hosted by HR Girlfriends. Hey, HR Girlfriends, a beautiful community. Y'all need to check them out on Facebook. on Saturday, and we started with meditation and discussed self-care. These are amazing professional degreed women in the HR Girlfriends community, but they came around each other to support and encourage. Coach Alicia, good morning and welcome.
Good morning, Karen. Thank you.
We are so honored.
Great to be here. I've heard
Thank
so much already.
Yes, thank you. There's a little bit of a delay, so forgive me if I talk over you. I wanted to bring you into the conversation. You say something all the time to those of us in the Rock Your Vision community, and as a coach and a leadership expert, a diversity inclusion consultant who travels the world, you say you cannot heal what you cannot feel. When you said that to me the first time, like I got emotional, like I needed a minute to sit in that, because very much like Michelle, you know, I've been raised to keep it together. It's kind of been indoctrinated in me that emotions are not a safe place in the workplace or frankly anywhere else, even in the church. I mean, I'm just going to tell it. Okay. And so can you talk to us about what that means? What does it mean when you say you cannot heal what you cannot feel?
Yes, Karen, I do say that because I live that. You know, I come from a place where, you know, we didn't talk about how you felt. In my home, we didn't talk about it. And I think there's something about, for me in the Black experience, it was like, there's so much that if you open the door to a feeling, if you don't just keep putting one foot in front of the other and pressing on, that somehow it's going to end you.
Ooh.
And what ended me was not talking about it. You know, not only do I do this learning and development and coaching, but I'm also 21 years in recovery. And in that process, I have had the opportunity to be connected to community and understand that's one thing that everyone has talked about, the importance of having a respect, is that what you said? A place where you can be, where you can express, where you could talk if you want to, but we have to have an outlet. There's something about our shared connection.
Yes.
That not only holds us up, but it also gives us the agency to go forward in a productive, healing way. If I don't have that, if I'm suppressing that, it's like pressure in a pipe. It's coming out. It's coming out. And so, you know, the thing that I always try to help my clients and my friends and family to do is to be able to express and understand that feelings are fact. You're going to feel something. I've had 30, 40 years of leadership development. And for the first 3 days after George Floyd was murdered, my chest was heavy. I had a knot in my stomach. I could feel my blood pressure rising. You know, and then after I had to stop, I'm like, take a breath.
Yes.
Take a breath.
So let me stop you right there. One of the things that I notice as a coach is that when I typically, not in every case, but in a lot of cases, I'm brought into an environment where there's tension or people are struggling. Now, these are leaders that we count on to have it together. These are leaders that we count on to lead large initiatives and, you know, sell product and represent businesses and do all of those things. But what I find and what I observed was that I would come into a coaching session and their breathing would be like short, you know, and I was watching this, and so I began doing some centering exercises at the start. Now, this is in corporate America. Yeah. Okay. And I would say, can we just stop for a second? I would have them go through this process, what you have taught us in this community about the power of somatic experience, where you get in touch with your body you get in touch with your breathing. I did this recently, and a very influential leader, someone who has all kinds of degrees behind their name, began to experience emotion because they did not realize they weren't breathing. That's powerful and important, because when you breathe, it oxygenates your brain. I mean, this is Dr. Colson's space, so she can speak to this, but it oxygenates your brain, which drives the analytical process and the creative process. And those are the two places that we count on with leaders that we send out into the world to lead, to minister in the faith community, in the business community, and so on. I am so excited for that.
We cannot suspend our humanity, though.
Yeah, so good.
We cannot suspend the fact that we feel they're going somewhere.
Yeah.
And so I feel, like one of my things is to help people understand, first of all, what's happening to you somatically.
Yes.
Which of your values have been violated or validated, and what is that driving in how you're responding, and how can you use them to bring you back to center? Because we're going there. We just have to learn how to come back to center, because you're going there. You're human. And it's okay.
So let's stick there for a minute, because part of what's happening in the African American community, in the white community, in the community at large, is that the experiences from the outside are hijacking our brains. So our values and what's important to us gets pushed to the back, right? What gets pushed to the front is fear, terror, darkness, toxicity, suspicion. All that feels like it's at the front of the brain. And you can't stay there, right? Because your body then goes into fight or flight mode. And what happens when you stay in fight or flight mode is it begins to degrade the emotions, the brain space, the heart space, all of the spaces that help us to be good community members. Is it any wonder that people in the African American community feel a heightened sense of fear? But let's not forget that people in the white community as well feel a heightened sense of fear. People who are either already allies or people who want to be allies feel they feel a sense of, wait a minute, am I the enemy? Come on. And with that, I want to switch the conversation. I want to bring Pastor Andy into this, because I think he has a very unique experience in terms of his role as a member of the faith community, a leader of the faith community, but also his own personal experience where, he's always been an ally. I mean, he's family to me, sometimes more than other folks who say they my family. Anyway, we'll talk about that later. That's another session. But Pastor Andy, can you speak to this a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. I think what we are discovering is this expression of, and I'm taking notes, by the way. I feel like I'm just like, this is a download for me.
Yeah.
I'm thankful I didn't have to pay for this class, but man, this is rich. I think the expression, what I've noticed is this is expression of pain and trauma that's been compounded, and this real articulated well, I don't have control over my voice. This idea that this has violated or validated my core values, my core existence, has created this reaction versus action dynamic at place. And so what I've discovered is that because we're facing this systemic problem and we need to resolve it, that systemic problem that's been unearthed, thank goodness, and now we're getting inclusion conversation around that, has also a bit created this instability and fear, and places that have built bridges, communities that have built bridges are having to rebuild bridges that have already been built. And so now what's happening is I'm seeing in my own culture and environment, our family, Karen, and this world, everybody's trying to get a handle while trying to also be a part of the solution. So it's this betrayal dynamic that it's existing. If I'm caring for me, I'm also betraying somebody else. If I'm caring for somebody else, I'm betraying me. And it's almost irreconcilable to the mind. So I love what you cannot heal what you cannot feel. This pause says, and I liken it to this. When we take a flight, the first thing they tell you is in the event that oxygen is the pressure in the cabin goes and a mask drop, don't put the mask on the person next to you, put the mask on yourself, or you won't have the oxygen to put it on the person next to you. And what I'm seeing is there's almost a chaos that has caused us to lose our ability and permission to say, let me breathe so I can help others breathe. And I think because of that, what is now happening is we're not making decisions that are a part of the solution or the temptation, let me say, as part of the solution. And so here's what I find the reaction is there. We're attacking organisms instead of organizations. And so the very people that we need to come together to resolve the systemic problem of racism is being eclipsed by our trauma. And again, Dr. Colson, you're the expert, so please correct me where I'm wrong. But what I believe I'm witnessing is, so what we can't do is destroy a system that really is not seen but felt. It's not seen, but we experience the fruit. So we attack the organism because that's the natural place to go. So it's easier for me to go after you instead of talking to you about the system. And so it's this idea of this, I need to breathe first okay, now I see clearly, right? And so so watching people do that uniquely different. We say something in our world that says, don't judge somebody because they sin differently than you do, right? Let's call it what it is. And by the way, in our culture, that word sin is interpreted as missing the mark. Missing the mark. So don't judge somebody because they missed the mark differently than you missed the mark. Let's breathe, stop, and then let's recognize we got to come back together and recognize, whoa, wait a minute. We need each other to help. Let me breathe, and then let us breathe, and then we can do something, right?
So we could spend all day there. Rhonda, I want you to comment. But one of the things I want to highlight here, and I hope this sets somebody free, I'm just going to pause for a moment and ask you in the community, if you're joining us live, first of all, thank you. Good morning, Angela Karanja. I see you. And good morning, Linda Gibbons. I am so excited you are here. But I want to remind you to share this conversation right now. We'd love to have more people join the live conversation. So feel free to share this. But even if you're watching on replay, just make sure to put in the comments #replay and then share it with your community, because we want people to hear this. We want to begin to normalize some of what we're feeling, and we want to begin to building the bridges to each other's communities so that we can begin to heal and move forward together. But one of the things that you said, Pastor Andy, that I think is so powerful, and I'm just delighted to step on the enemy's neck right now to say this, and that is that the enemy's strategy, any enemies, if you think about warfare, the enemy's strategy is to create, we call it shock and awe. For those that are in the military or law enforcement community, we call it shock and awe. Let me scare the living daylights out of them so they can't think, they can't feel, and it creates what you referred to, Pastor Andy, as a sense of chaos. You don't know who's your enemy, who's your friend. Wait a second. And so what do? Woo! Retreat, right? You retreat. And so, combine that with the effect of quarantine, where we are commanded to retreat. And then you have this incredibly powerful kind of psychological warfare almost that happens. And you have this incredible sense of vulnerability. Then you add something on top of what you're already feeling. And, then you're just kind of brought to your knees. And so I'm just delighted to say this, that we've been in this long enough to know now we can kind of, come up from the smoke of the kind of theoretical bombs that have been dropped on us, to get some clarity, right? To look around and to recognize who's our enemy, but we can't stop, or who's actually our real enemy, but also who's our ally. But we cannot always look at life from the perspective of who's my enemy and who's our ally. That is not living, that is coping. And for a minute, we need to cope. Coping is kind of that first, like, how do I just keep my wits about me, right? How do I stabilize myself in the moment? But at some point, we need to find a line of sight to what it means to thrive. We have to get there. And the way to do that is not in isolation. It is with the community at large. And so I just want to highlight right now that, I want to give you permission to step outside of that smoke, to step away from that shock and awe. We can step into, to begin to breathe, and to begin to look at our neighbor as, what do we have in common? I wish I thought to grab the flowers that are here on my desk. Yesterday, I was working out in the garden, and my neighbor who speaks, he speaks English, but you can tell that English is not his native language. He's a very quiet man, but we garden together. And so I'll be outside and working in the garden. And in this time of quarantine, we're now in the garden more than ever. But before, we barely spoke to each other. But now I'll see him in his garden. He'll see mine. He'll see me in mine. And we kind of look at each other and nod, don't say anything. Yesterday, he brought me some gardenias and he handed them to me. And he said, "These are my wife's favorite flowers." And I'm telling you, it nearly ended me. Did he do it because he's concerned about me as a woman of color? I don't know. We didn't talk about it. But he did something kind. He was my neighbor and my ally in that moment. He expressed a level of kindness that ministered to my soul. You guys, we have to begin to look at each other coming up out of the shock and awe as neighbors, friends, and allies. And for those of us in the faith community in particular, and Pastor Andy will talk a lot about this, as tribe members, because that's indeed what we are. We're part of a collective community tribe. Rhonda, you were going to say something.
Yeah, and actually, I want to use that example that you just shared of your neighbor. When you received those gardenias from him, Karen, what did you feel?
I felt my heart literally swelled.
Mm-hmm.
It was like in that moment I could breathe.
Yeah.
And the feeling of agape love I had for this person that I don't really know.
Yeah.
It kind of overtook my anxiety. It made space for my humanity. And I felt like a little girl. I think I literally giggled. And I took the flowers and I said, thank you in that moment. He nodded his head and I ran inside. My son was trying to talk to me and I'm like, give me a minute. I'm trying to find a vase. And I went in and I got a vase and I took it outside and I showed him what I did with it. And he did this.
And so here's why I want to use that example, because all of us in different ways have talked about this. But what's really important, especially in corporate communities, you hear people talking about this concept of mindfulness. And what mindfulness really boils down to at its core is being fully present in the moment to understand what's going on and what you're experiencing.
Yes.
When we are in the moment, many times with our emotions, we don't experience them. We try to do one of two things. There's usually two defaults. We either suppress them or we spill them. And when we suppress them, we're not truly experiencing that emotion. We're wanting to push it to the side for a time. Yeah. When we spill it, many times it's an irresponsible way that we're allowing it to get out. But like Coach Alicia said, you can't heal what you can't feel. If we don't allow ourselves to be in that emotion and to feel it, there's not anything that you can do to re-engage that same emotion in reciprocity to your neighbor next weekend, right? And so there's a third option that we sometimes forget about when it comes to emotions. Instead of spilling it or suppressing it, it's surfing it. It's being fully present with it. It's understanding when all of a sudden the tears hit me, it's okay for those tears to hit me. Because, and Dr. Colson, I know I'm getting into your space, and I don't have a degree in psychology, but what I've read is if we allow ourselves to be fully present with the emotion, that unique emotion only lasts for a number of seconds. But yet when we suppress it or spill it, we actually give it an elongated life. So when you're dealing with this and you feel that anger, which we know anger is a masking emotion that might be centered in denial or hurt, and you don't allow yourself to truly experience that hurt, guess what? Instead of dealing with it right then and allowing it to move, it builds and becomes a day and a week and a month and a year and a decade until it has truly built up into this traumatic level, which is where Dr. Colson is coming in and working with us to deal with that trauma. But it's really important that we understand surfing that emotion allows me to be fully with it, fully embrace it, fully understand it, so that I can heal myself in the moment of it and then move on and move forward.
So powerful. So two things come up, and then I want to invite the panel to comment on what Aronde just said. But one is, one of the things that I recognize for those who are in the healing community, so whether you're in ministry or, you're a somatic healer, whatever, they have to be overwhelmed. Dr. Colson, you have to be overwhelmed right now. And I've spoken to several. We have one of our amazing partners, Mind and Body Christian Health Group, Brandon and Brittany Brown, are experiencing that.
I trained Brandon.
Brandon is one of my favorite humans in the world, and Brittany is a wellness expert as well. She's also Mrs. Kennesaw right now. That's another story. But they're talking about the fact that the care community is just being overwhelmed. And one of the things that I recognize as we talk to people about getting help is that if you are not able to afford a counselor, or you maybe don't feel like you have a huge network, I want to encourage you to do something that I'm calling creating communities of care. And maybe that's a thing already, but here's the thing. Much like Aronde is stepping forward to bring people together to talk, to connect with one another, that is incredibly important, and it is an incredibly effective strategy. Because not everybody can go to a counselor. I know some counselors who are booked through August. So if you are not able to get in to see a licensed professional like Dr. Colson, I want to remind you to create a community of care. And even if you are in a place where you're not feeling well or you're not feeling supported yourself, identify 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 friends that you can get together, and make sure that your purpose, while you might not have an agenda, is to create a productive space. So you don't want to stay in that space where you're, creating a lot of vitriol and that sort of thing, because that energy will eventually degrade your ability to think and feel in a healthy and productive way. The second thing I want to say, and I want to ask Dr. Colson, and I also want to ask Pastor Andy to comment on this, is something that I call sitting with grief. I'm about to post a blog post on this. It's called Sitting with Grief. So one of the things that our allies have been asking people in the white community who are overwhelmed with the reactions of people that they know and people that they don't know who are African American, where rage or fear or anger is coming to the surface, and they're like, whoa, I just wanted to know how you were doing. And they actually get an answer. It can be incredibly overwhelming to receive that. And so it's no wonder, let me just say this, it's no wonder that many in the white community are overwhelmed and are feeling a little recoiled, because the reality is that in any healthy relationship, whether we're in COVID-19 or dealing with the aftermath of George Floyd or not, no one person can handle all your stuff. No one person was designed to handle all your stuff. So yes, do you need care? Yes, do you need to process it? But it's important to remember and to be compassionate with those who are our allies and those who want to be allies, that they may not be able to handle all our stuff. So I think it's important to have the conversation about how we process in a healthy manner what it is we're feeling and experiencing, so that we will continue to build community and not tear it down inadvertently. Dr. Colson, Pastor Andy Smith, can you comment on this?
Yeah, I wanted to just make a couple comments about the brain, if I can, and because we're a lot of us we're talking about our mind, but our brain really is so important in this, because what's happening is the amygdala, which is you think of it as the smoke detector. It's the part that sniffs out danger. So when it gets triggered, it sets off a chemical reaction in the brain, in the limbic system, which is at the center of the brain. Here, if you go down from here and across from here into the center of the brain, and it literally hijacks the brain, and the prefrontal cortex, that part of us that's thinks is reasoning and rational planning, goes offline. And so we want to bring it back online, because that's how you bring balance. You're not going to, to try to shut down your limbic system, you have to take drugs. And that's why, with ongoing toxic levels of stress, which is what we're experiencing, where the fight or flight response gets triggered and it stays on. Mm-hmm. Especially if we're listening to the news 24 hours a day, if we're looking at social media 24 hours a day. I mean, that it's triggered constantly, and we're living in the fight or flight response. Now, to just turn it off, you're going to have to get drunk. You're going to have to use drugs. I'm not recommending that. Just let's say that right now. That's not what I'm recommending. But that's what people resort to. Right. Because they don't know what to do, because you feel crazy, because you're so overwhelmed, and your brain says you're going to die. And so we can use our own brains to bring balance, to calm it down. Okay. Now, and one of the things I teach my clients is numbers, using numbers. One of my favorite techniques that most people really like is a very simple technique, and that is to start at 100 and count backwards by threes. And as you do that, if I had the panel do it right now, and say, okay, now count out loud, what you would see is we would start doing our eyes like this, because we're looking for the numbers in our brains. And so when we're doing that, we're literally lighting up the prefrontal cortex. We are building, and as we practice it, we're building neural pathways, increased numbers of neural pathways between the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala. And the prefrontal cortex will begin to impact the limbic system and calm it down. Because as Aronde said, you have to, and I loved what Alicia said, you've got to, you can't heal what you can't feel. We all feel. There's no one that doesn't feel. We have to put words to feelings. We have to be able to identify them, to name them, to claim them, and to share them. We have to be able to talk about them. And if we can't talk about them, and we are supposed to learn this as children, but in toxic homes, we don't learn that. We're taught to shut up. Don't think. Don't feel. Don't think for yourself. Don't trust anybody. Just survive and keep your mouth shut. And that we learn to stuff our feelings, and they don't go away. We think they go away. They're just buried because our brain holds on to them. And then what Aronde said, it's not that, it's that I think of it like a computer program running in the background. They continue these programs continue to run in the background of your brain. It's not on the screen. Yeah. If you look behind what's going on, there's a gazillion programs going on your computer. The same thing is happening in your brain. Yeah. And these programs are running, and we're operating out of them in the fight or flight, fix kind of a way of living, just surviving. And we've developed a survivor identity that's not our true identity. And we start living out of this survivor identity rather than out of our true identity.
And I think that's very true in the Black community.
Absolutely.
You know, when you look at the history of
historical trauma,
where,
and it gets passed down generation after generation. It is time that we have to stop. We have to stop it. We have to heal the wounds. And heal the wounds, bring peace, and let people heal. And so that, because you have to deal with the past to move forward, Karen. Your topic is moving forward, and we have to heal. We have to deal with it. We have to stop and deal with the past so that we can move forward. That's the only way to make it work.
I really appreciate you saying that. It's incredibly powerful. I talked to someone in my family the other day. I hadn't seen him in a long time. African-American male, obviously, or not obviously. What am I saying? Look at my family. But anyway, African-American male, you know, in his 50s, highly productive member of society. When I look in the dictionary and I think kindness, I see the word kindness, I see his face. He is, you know, a lover of everyone. And we were talking about, I called him because I hadn't heard from him in a long time. And I'm like, I'm just checking on you. And I'm like, I'm cooking and I need you to come over. It's not a request. And he came over with his mask and all like that. And so by the end of the visit, he had relaxed enough. And I said, tell me what's going on. And he said, Karen, he said, and he's in a customer service role. And he said, I realized that all of this that's going on has triggered for me some of the pain that I have hidden, things that have happened to me that I never told anybody because there was no one to tell. There was no one really who cared. And I find myself angry and emotional, looking at my white customers, wondering what they're suggesting or saying. That's a very real experience. And so one of the things, Aronde, that I'm so excited to hear about, and I actually mentioned this yesterday in a conversation with someone, is the fact that our Black men need a place to process their pain. It's been something that is not really talked about in the Black community. It is being talked about more and more. There are organizations like the 100 Black Men of Atlanta and 100 Black Men, the national organization as well, and the organizations that Aronde and Alicia are working with that are recognizing the special and unique needs of African-American men. Now, let's be clear. This is not about weakness. This is not about somehow being, less than or incapable of. This is a human need to process and to have a place to offload what Dr. Colson was talking about being suppressed. It's a very important thing. It is important to do that in other places. And let me say one other thing for those. I actually had somebody say to me, I don't understand why there are all these organizations, Black this and Black that. Doesn't that just further the divide? And I would say, if it's never been clear to you, and I hope now it is, that there is a need for people to have places where they have affinity and where they have a common understanding, where they have an equal footing. They don't have to start at the bottom and work their way up, but they can have a common language and a common experience. And that's not to say that everybody speaks for the Black community. They don't. There are some things happening in the world right now in the Black community that grieve my heart, quite frankly, that frustrate me. And so while I have a sense of kinship, it doesn't mean that I want somebody to speak for me. But there are times when we have to speak together, lest we end up where we are. And so for those of you that are struggling and in the white community, in our ally community, I want to encourage you to shift your perspective. I want you to look at, I want my Black brothers and sisters to be healthy and well, so that we can move forward in peace. We have already come up on an hour, believe it or not. I don't even know how that happened, but we're going to continue the conversation a little bit, and I hope that you'll stay tuned. I want to just take a moment and remind you to share your thoughts, your comments in the comment feed. This is an opportunity when we have this esteemed panel to ask them questions. They've given of their time, and I'd love to have them involved in the conversation. So I want to turn the conversation, as we begin to wrap it up, with this question. We've covered a lot of ground and yet not even touched the surface. But there are so many who are curious about, what do we do now? You know, we've now kind of lived with the images. We've acknowledged the fact that we're all on overwhelm, and you know, our brains are being hijacked, our emotions are being hijacked, and our relationships impacted. But this is a community where we talk about walking forward together. Many of us are friends. Many of us do life together. We vacation together. You know, many of us, you know, my husband is Caucasian. My daughters are Caucasian. My father-in-law and mother-in-law are Caucasian. We have to walk together in peace, and we cannot do it with, you know, kind of always looking at, you know, what our defenses are. We need to live. And so I'd like to talk for a moment about, and I'd like for each one of you to give comment on this for just a few minutes about how we move forward. What's important now as we move into this space? Aronde, I'll start with you.
Yeah, you know, I think that we've all hinted and called it, and for me, from my faith perspective, the reality is that racism is a sin. Mm-hmm. And looking at it from that perspective, what we have to understand is that we are all subject to it. Mm-hmm. And so the move forward, simply for me, and as I share with other people, is you have to recognize you're either an anti-racist or you're racist. And it's that simple. And it doesn't matter the excuse many of us have used for years that, well, because of the color of my skin, I can't be racist. I'm being oppressed as well. Guess what? We still have that. You know, when I got mad in Europe because the Asian tourists knocked me out of the way to take the perfect selfie, and I was like, here they go again. This is what they always do. That was racist.
So wait a minute. Hold on. I can't leave that.
Yeah.
Unpack that for us for just a minute.
Yeah. You know, one of the names, if you haven't heard, that you'll hear quite a bit is Dr. Ibram Kendi, who's the author of How to Be an Anti-Racist, who has phenomenal work. But one of the things that he says is when we take the individual negative trait of one person and apply it as a generality to the entire group, that's racism.
Say it one more time.
Yeah. So that
when we take the individual negative trait of one person and apply it generally to the entire group of people, that's racism. And so when we look at it, in my experience, I was in the Louvre in France with my wife celebrating our anniversary, and I'm trying to go towards the Venus de Milo. And this Asian tourist just literally knocks me out the way to get there to take a picture with their selfie stick. And my immediate thought and response was, man, Asians always want to knock you out of the way to take their picture. That was racist because I attributed that one experience with that one woman and applied it to everybody. And so to me, what we have to understand, and for those of us from a faith perspective, when we're in church, we say, I am a sinner, and everybody claps, and we understand that that's part of our process as Christians and as believers. Well, we've got to be able to say, I'm a racist, and I need to work on being an anti-racist. And so to me, that's the way forward, is understanding that just as in whatever our faith tradition is, we are constantly working to get better practitioners, better believers, whatever our faith tradition is. We have to understand tomorrow, just because I said I'm going to be an anti-racist, I'm not going to be there tomorrow.
It's process.
Going to be a work in process. Exactly. And so we have to each commit to that.
Wow. We could stay there all day, and maybe we'll unpack that. Pastor Andy, you were going to say something?
I was just going to say, Aronde, you just diffused an issue that was untouchable and without grasp because you just brought flesh
Come
to
on.
something that has been spirit.
Come
And now we
on.
can attack that. So man, that was so brilliant. And the fact of the matter is now what that opens up are conversations now that will eradicate systemic racism, because now it's something I can take and I can go apply right now in my world immediately today. So very brilliant. Thank you for that insight.
Yeah, so this is you are building a bridge, Aronde, in that truth, and it is one of the things that we don't talk about in the Black community. And this is not a blame game, right? This is family business, but we got to talk about it, because while we understand the mechanism of racism and we understand the origins of racism, we also have to understand and be a part of the solution and the remedy to racism. Because if we're not, we can't be a part of the problem and call other people what we're talking about and expect there to be enterprise-wide, community-wide progress. We cannot do that. We have to be able to tell the truth about our own stuff. So and I saw a video somewhere that was talking about, we spend a lot of time standing and saying, Black Lives Matter, Black Lives Matter, Black Lives Matter, and they do. And we can also not be subject to things like the rioting that we're experiencing. And there's a lot of talk about, there are paid rioters and all that, and that may be true. And we have to take responsibility for our own communities, because I'm gonna be honest with you, if I'm just completely real and raw, and I pardon my French, but it pisses me off to see Black people in the Black community destroying the Black community, because y'all are the ones I want to take over my knee when I have to worry about where my 101-year-old auntie is going to go to pick up her medicine, because the CVS that she went to for a social visit, not only to pick up her medicine, but for a social visit, no longer exists. I take issue with that. And we got to tell the truth about that stuff, or we will not be completely set free. I could go on. Anyway. Woo! I need a minute, y'all. I need a minute.
And I hear you talking about responsibility, taking responsibility.
Yeah.
And so I guess my question is, being brought up and socialized in America with the narrative that all of us receive from the cradle to the grave.
Yeah.
It creates a bias, an unconscious bias. So my question is, what happened with you, Aronde? Was it a bias, an unconscious bias, or was it racism? Because we all have that. I mean, I remember getting on a plane the first time after 9/11, and a man who looked to be of Middle Eastern descent got on the plane, and I remember having a visceral reaction. My stomach literally flipped. Now, I'm on my way to teaching inclusion and diversity. I am like the inclusion queen. So it took a minute. I'm like, okay, why is the stomach flipping? And then I, tried to get from my amygdala to my prefrontal, and I started watching the people getting on the plane, and they're looking at this man. He sits right next to me, and they're looking at him with all of this energy, this hate, this everything. It was awful. And then I started feeling bad because I started feeling him shrinking. So was I being a racist, or was it bias? Was it bias because I've been hearing a narrative for 3 weeks that everyone who looked like him was a terrorist?
Yeah. So let me
racism has to do when one has the ability to exert some power over.
Right. Racism or trauma, or you having a trauma reaction, a trigger.
That we all have, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. So let me kind of build on it. And again, this is a book that I would highly recommend to anybody, How to Be a Racist by Dr. Ibram Kendi. What is interesting is last week, 3 of the top New York Times bestsellers were all books on racism. It was this book, it was Robin DiAngelo's White Fragility, and it was another book titled So You Want to Talk About Race. One of the things that I think that we have to understand is, and Dr. Kendi talks about it in this book, The heartbeat of racism is denial.
Mm.
What keeps racism going is the denial that it's there and that it exists.
Come on.
The heartbeat of anti-racism is confession.
Mm.
It's acknowledgement, it's acceptance. And so many times, just as we have had white colleagues say to us, well, but I'm not racist, right? That in and of itself needs to be a flag. And just as times where we go, but wait a minute, I've been oppressed for 50 years. There's no way that I can be racist. Sometimes we've just got to call the time out and call it what it is and say, yeah, but it really is. Let's stop tiptoeing around it and call it out for what it is, because only through that, remember, you can't heal what you can't feel, right?
Yes.
And so if I'm going to heal this issue of racism in
Truth
my
and
community,
reconciliation.
I've got to be able to have the same conversation and dialogue like Pastor Andy. I got to put that mask on myself. I've got to acknowledge my own part in many of these things, but also understand that racism is also rooted in policy.
Come on.
It's not just, we just can't blame it on power.
Right.
It's the policies that continue to keep it embedded. It's
Right.
why we see, even within our own Black community, and we don't want to talk about it, how some of us will vote to, yeah, let's just keep everybody pressed down in the Pittsburgh neighborhood of Atlanta. Keep them over there. Let's make sure we don't get transportation coming out to Cobb County because we want to keep everybody in the inner core. See, those are still racist policies. And that's what we have to own up to if we are truly going to have a way forward to move out of this collectively as the diverse group that we are. People.
So powerful. Y'all are just
Truth and confession, truth and reconciliation. That's that when we look at other communities who have healed. Truth and reconciliation. Confession.
So I want to go back to what Arandi said, just in case y'all missed it. The heartbeat of racism is denial. The heartbeat of anti-racism is confession.
Yes.
And I want to bring forward a concept that is getting a lot of airplay right now, and with good reason. And this is the talk of reconciliation. Reconciliation, what does it mean to be reconciled? Reconciliation, as you begin hearing about it, is not about guilt. It's about responsibility. It is about that tribal behavior of saying, in this moment, we're part of the same tribe, but in this moment, I am for you, and I'm going to protect you so that you can heal, so that you can do the work. I'm going to join the conversation. It's a very important topic, but I want to get to a couple of questions that we have. Linda Givens from Kalinda's Closet. If y'all aren't following Kalinda's Closet, I need y'all to go and follow Kalinda's Closet on IG and Facebook. She's an entrepreneur of the best kind. She has a line of handbags that are second to none. She travels the world and is an international leader as well. But she says, this is a question for Dr. Colson and Arandi. I called you Dr. Arandi. I'm prophesying, Dr. Arandi. She says there's a historical fear in the Black community about the medical field that dates back to the experiments that were used to be conducted on Blacks. Now that's heavy stuff. That's a whole separate class. What's been your experience in bridging that history to be a help? I'll ask that. I'm gonna put this other one up real quickly. So, Dr. Colson, I'm gonna ask you to take that one, and then Michelle Elise has a question. She says, "How can I navigate and initiate conversations with family members who are racist? We are so diverse in my country, but have some that have a tendency to speak so badly about others because we've been conditioned to recognize socioeconomic status rather than color. I believe this has caused a lot of confusion, and the reaction is anger instead of inclusion and the desire to be a part of positive impact." Coach Alicia, I'm going to ask you to take that. Arandi, I want you to chime in on that. So Dr. Colson, we're going to go back to Linda's question about the historical fear in the Black community of what's happening in the medical community that dates back. No longer happening, we hope. Maybe there's more to be known about that. But can you talk about that historical fear and the impact it's having on the Black community?
Sure. One of the things that we talk about in our counseling center is that issue that there is this historical trauma that has evolved into that the Black community doesn't go to counseling because you might be taken advantage of. I think that is, again, that's a normal reaction to trauma. And developing a trauma survivor identity. And I've developed a trauma model that is spiritually integrated. Karen, you've come to that training, the Strategic Trauma and Abuse Recovery. Pastor Andy, we held it at your church in your basement. And we've done the training up there. But in my book, I write, there's a chapter in my book, Break Every Stinking Chain, that I titled, It's Not Your Fault, But It Is Your Problem. And so when I say that, I say, well, it's not your fault that you got to this place. It's your responsibility to now recognize it and do something about it. One of the things that we do as a ministry is I have been proactively trained and hired African-American counselors. And I have attempted to do the same with Spanish-speaking counselors, with Latina counselors, but we don't have enough of a population in our area to serve. But we have proactively done that. If you visit our Facebook page or our website, you'll see a photograph of all of our counselors. And I have intentionally made it inclusive as I can possibly be. And so I think that when people call for counseling, they want to, African Americans a lot of times want to see an African American counselor. Totally understandable, totally acceptable, and encouraged, because we want to break the generational cycle of trauma. Our vision is seeing people everywhere, breaking that generational cycle of trauma. And until we start talking about it, Kalinda, until we start talking about it, we have to give people space and organization to talk about it. And that's what the trauma model I put together does. Instead of bringing chaos to, let's just bitch about it. Sorry, am I not allowed to say that word?
No, you're fine. We understand what that means.
Instead of let's all just sit around and let's organize this. Let's write our story down. Let's read our story. Let's identify our contradicted expectations, values, beliefs. Let's identify and put words to our losses. What have we lost? And
This
let's
is so good.
sit in a group, an organized, structured group, and grieve together. Grief can be healing. With trauma, people get stuck in their grief, and then they're stuck in the shock, denial, anger. Let's circle back. Shock, denial, anger. Let's circle back. And it just is this vicious cycle, and we never get unstuck and move forward into the acceptance of the pain, and finally into resolution. And resolution doesn't mean it goes away and I never feel about it. What it means is I'm not reliving it over and over and over and over again. It is not controlling my brain anymore. I control my brain. And if I want to sit down and revisit it, I can, but then I can close the book on it and move on to something else.
We could have an entire workshop, and I've already had a couple of folks in the comments that have said we need a masterclass, like a private masterclass where we can take this kind of offline and have a deeper conversation. But I know a couple of you have already jumped off because you have to go. We knew we would go a little bit long on this. We could go longer. But I want to acknowledge Rhonda Creighton for your work. I want to thank you for what you have brought to this conversation. We clearly need to have a chat. But I want people to know where they can get in touch with you. Would you share that with us, please?
Sure. The best place is on LinkedIn. Got off Facebook about 10 years ago during the election, so I haven't gone back on. Sorry. But LinkedIn, you won't find too many Arondes out there. So just look me up, Aronde Creighton on LinkedIn, and we'll be posting information about the respite on there as well.
All right. Wonderful. Coach Alicia, thank you so much for joining this conversation. Appreciate you so much for just being willing to share your knowledge and your wisdom with our community. You are such a consistent friend and mentor and coach to this community. We adore you. How can people reach you?
Thank you, Karen. This has been amazing, and I hope that we do this again.
We will.
You can reach me on LinkedIn. I will be posting. I'm launching a new series, Inner Leadership, 5 Steps to Unlocking Your Centering Superpowers. And that you can reach me there, or my company's Learning Path LLC. You can reach me at Alicia at Learning Path LLC.
Awesome. And let's see, Dr. Colson, how can we get in touch with you?
You can reach me on our Facebook page or our website. Our website is elccc.org. That's Eagles Landing Christian Counseling Center.org. Or our Facebook page, EL Christian Counseling, Facebook on Facebook, and then also 3 Facebook pages, and also on LinkedIn, Denise Colson on LinkedIn, and be sure to spell Denise with a C. It's like Denice, DENICE Colson. You can also reach me through LinkedIn, and you can see my books and on Amazon.com. Break Every Stinking Chain, Healing for Hidden Wounds. Yeah. And then I have a training manual for the Strategic Trauma and Abuse Recovery program.
And I'll just give a shameless plug to Dr. Colson. As she mentioned, I have taken her training. It is absolutely life-changing. You will have different conversations with others, but you will also have a different conversation with yourself. Changed my life. I cannot recommend her book, Break Every Stinking Chain, more highly. Go and buy the book today. We will be sure to put a link on our website and on our Facebook page and Instagram page, so you'll know how to get a hold of her. Pastor, once again, I'm prophesying. Dr. Smith, Pastor Andy, can you tell us how people can get a hold of you?
Yes, absolutely. You can go to our website, influencers.church, and you'll find the Kennesaw link, and there's a way to contact me through there, or you can go to our Influencers Kennesaw Facebook page, and you can reach me through there. I'm also on Facebook and Instagram, Andy Smith, actually Andrew.B.Smith. And so, but you can find me there. Or you can come see us when we open back up. We're in Kennesaw.
Yeah, we've got Zoom Church every single Sunday. We welcome you to come to that. Just check out our Facebook page, Influencers Church Atlanta, and you can find your way there. We have an incredibly diverse, beautifully diverse community. And I'm telling you, God is moving even in the virtual space. He owns it after all. But when we get together, let me just tell you, the first time I went to Influencers, they literally broke the floor. We were worshiping, we were going in so hard. So if that's your kind of environment, we welcome you to join us. Vanessa, I want to thank you for all you're doing behind the scenes to support this amazing community. He's going to be posting in just a little while. We've curated a list of job opportunities and free virtual trainings to keep this community productive. And we'll have that on our Facebook page, so you can check that out there. Listen to me, all of you. I love you, and there's not a thing you can do about it. I am so honored to hold this space with you, to go in, to have family conversations together, because when we do so, we grow and we thrive together. I am determined to break the enemy's neck, to tell darkness to go back to where it came from. We're doing this together. It's my joy. I want you to always remember, you have more options than you realize, beloved. All right, until next time, panel, I want you to hold on for just a moment. But until next time, we'll see you on the other side. Have a great morning, everybody.